Hi, my name is Josh Butts. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Foundry. And today we're going to be talking about LLM visibility, how that's changing the digital media sector, especially in technology media, and how to best position your content and your brands to win in that space. So a little background, we are Foundry, we're a digital publisher, among other things. And because we operate all of these premium brands, we are uniquely invested in being experts in this. Um, as a both a marketer and a publisher, we care about this kind of from both sides of the equation. And so we really think there's a lot of opportunity going forward in this space, to be at the forefront of how to get visibility both for our own brands and also for our partners. Um, so what's the shift? The 20 years ago, the playbook was basically Google, right? Google was the king, and has been for many of our careers at this point. And the key was backlinks, right? You wanted links and you wanted good keywords, and that was how you won. You wanted to be ranked number one on Google for a certain search term that was relevant to your brand, and that was how you got traffic, and that was great. But more and more buyers are starting to do their research with these new LLM chatbot tools, and they're not necessarily starting at Google. That doesn't mean that they aren't using Google, and in some cases, Google is the AI or the LLM that they're using. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're starting with a keyword search. And it's important to notice that, like in a lot of cases now, the first touch point with your brand may not be your content in the words that you wrote. It may be a model's, an LLM's summary of your content that's been pulled together both from the words that you've published about your site and your products, but also what other people are saying. It's a synthesized answer. And that's not necessarily bad. It's actually just a new way of people interacting with your brand. It's still an impression, if you will. It's still a place where you are in front of someone from a branding standpoint, but you just have a little bit less control over it. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It's just different. Before we get too deep into this, though, I want to define some words. And these are certainly up for debate in the industry. Obviously, SEO is the traditional way we've been working, right? It is keywords, backlinks, blue links on a list on Google or Bing or Yahoo, and domain authority. That kind of got us up until, let's call it like 2018. Then you started to see this shift to what I'm calling AEO for this presentation. Others may kind of blur the lines between these words, but you started to see search engines really focus on answering people's questions. You started to see a rise of FAQ data that was being published in that rich snippet that they called at the top of the search results. And you started to see more and more ways for you to tell Google, how does my content work? What kind of content is it? How can you use it? And that led to this structured markup that was basically kind of that like 2018 timeframe on until probably 2022, when you started to see the rise of ChatGPT and a lot of these other AI tools. Now we get into GEO, generative optimization. What's the best we can do there? It's to be cited by an LLM. I want to be included in the synthesized answers that those things are providing to users as they ask questions and do research. And so that's yet another way that we get visibility for our content. But these are all nested. You still have to do SEO. It's still important to be good at that. LLMs operate their own search engines in a lot of cases, and being on the first page is more important than it ever was in some ways. The topical authority and the structure and all of these fundamentals that we've been saying you should be doing for a decade, those still matters. This is just more. That's the unfortunate side effect of this, is it's not a swap out of, well, we used to have to do SEO and then we really had to focus on AEO on top of that, but now GEO replaces it. No, it is actually more work and more stuff on top of that. But it's all built on the same fundamentals. So if you have those fundamentals in place already, you can leverage that for sure to be well cited and well included in a lot of these LLM answers. It does, though, diverge from the different ways that traditional SEO would have worked versus the way we're seeing a lot of these LLMs start to process content. The interesting thing is that it also moves really fast. So this is what we're seeing kind of now, and you can expect that that's going to continue to evolve. One thing is that we found long narratives don't work as well as nicely chunked and fragmented pieces of content. We'll talk a little bit about that more in the coming section here, but models don't retrieve full documents if they don't have to. They really want to find a fragment. They want to find a small piece that is directly related to the question that a user is asking. They don't necessarily want to understand 1,000 words. They want to understand 100 words that are super relevant to the actual question at hand. The other thing is you can inform an answer, and you can be participating in this exchange of information, and you may never get a link or you may never get traffic out of it. That doesn't mean that your content is informing the end user of what they were trying to learn about. It means you may not get as much credit up front for that information as you used to, but that doesn't mean you're not teaching them about your brand and teaching them about your products. You just have to accept that there's a different gateway that they get to that. And I think the other thing that we're seeing is that recency and update frequency can carry more weight here in the LLM world than they do in traditional search. A lot of that traditional guidance for search, while update frequency was important, there was also this idea of evergreen content. And you really want to have like all of this authority pushed into one master location where you could be ranking on that page and be number one with that page. And I think we're starting to see that become more diversified and more more content more frequently wins a lot more times in the LLM space than that kind of like traditional authority building from a link structure standpoint and from a page structure standpoint. So there's kind of three ways that an AI bot is going to come access your content. And it's important to understand the difference because they all serve a different use case. The one everybody's afraid of is training. Training is the bots coming by from OpenAI or Perplexity or Meta and saying, hey, like, I'm building a model. I'm ingesting all this content. It's what publishers are afraid of. It's what a lot of people are worried about because once it goes into that model, it can never come back out. That is the black box. They can't tell you how it gets there or what they've got in there because it's all converted down to numbers and mathematics. And so training is one that it doesn't happen very often. Maybe a couple times a year, they're doing active training on these big LLM models. And it's expensive. It's expensive for them to do the training. And it's expensive, frankly, for people who are publishing content to keep feeding it out to them. Like servers cost money, bandwidth costs money. So training is something that doesn't happen super often, but it's the thing that when you see people worried about AI accessing their content, that's what they're worried about. The next one is search indexing. So all of these models at this point are pretty much running a search index internally. Obviously, Google has its own search index that they use for Gemini. OpenAI and Anthropic are definitely maintaining their own search indexes. And they work the same way search always has worked. They send bots out. They may go out weekly. They will crawl your content, make sure it's updated, get the latest version of it. And you'll see that regularly. If you're looking at logs for your server, you will see those bots coming by on a regular basis as Googlebot does to index content. And it's important to note that training and search indexing, those are happening kind of in the background. They're on a schedule. They're not happening as a result of a user interacting. Real-time answers is different. Real-time answers is happening as users interact with something, we'll say ChatGPT. A user is typing prompts in and they're getting answers back. Sometimes to synthesize the answers, those models will go and they'll do a web search on their own search index and they will go say like, hey, what was number one? It was this site. Go get the content from that site and let me synthesize it. Let me get the words out of there and figure out how to answer the question. Our goal here, the best we can hope for today, in June of 2026, is to be cited as a result of that interaction. They went out, they got you the answer, and they said, here's the sources that I used real time to answer that question for you. We want to be cited. That's the kind of best we can hope for, because it's a possible click. It's a way for a user to navigate from that content to our properties. And it's a way that we can do some analytics and at least track some traffic. If we're not cited, again, that doesn't mean that we weren't used or synthesized or our information wasn't shared. It just means that we're not really going to get any measurable outcome from it, aside from a downstream kind of branding effect. So how does this really work? For citations, again, there's two modes. There's what does the model have in its internal knowledge? That is the stuff that it trained on. If you ask a question of an LLM and it just immediately starts spitting back words at you, you are getting internal knowledge. It believes that it knows the answer to that without looking at internal data. External data, where it needs to use a search. It's called real-time retrieval. It's going to go out and it's going to go access those web pages and that content on the user's behalf right then and there. And you'll see it happening in the user interfaces. You can only be cited when they use a search and they do that real-time retrieval. They will never cite a source from internal knowledge. Most people would argue it's not even possible technically to do that. So when they go outside to get that new information, that's when you'll get the citation, you'll get the hint in the user interface of where you were cited. And the interesting thing to remember here is that if you are not in their search index, because, for example, you are not allowing their search bots to come index your content, because you're blocking AI, right? Because you're scared of training, you will not be cited. They can't cite you if they can't find you. And so in order for them to find you, you need to be in their search index. So that's kind of the balance we have to strike here. This also matters for how we monitor whether we're being cited or not. We do have to trigger a search. We can't just assume that the users are going to do something that requires that search to happen. They force the model to go get more information. If people are interacting with your particular area and brand and content, and they're not doing anything that needs recency or extended information or more detailed technical information, they may not trigger a search, and there's nothing we can do about that. You won't be cited because nobody will be. So this is how citations actually work. So this is ChatGPT, and you can see I asked it, simple question, how should I evaluate enterprise storage vendors? And so it just spat the answer back. It gave me that text. You can see there's no link. There's no extra information here. This is purely out of its trained knowledge. Now, if I ask a more complicated question, who are the top storage vendors? Who are the best? I add more qualifications like for mid-market companies. You can see it says searching the web. And so that actually is going out to OpenAI's search index, and it is going to search, find a result, click on that result on behalf of the user in the background, pull the information down, and you can see it's cited this worldwide technology website about the Magic Quadrant for that. And those are clickable links. Those can take you through to the website. You can get traffic from those. That's the best we can do right now. That's the general, our goal right now is to be cited as often as possible in these LLM answer engines. So how do you make your content get cited? That's the thing everybody wants to know. So I think especially in the tech space, one of the things that we run into is is gated content. We have a lot of industry momentum around the idea of you fill out a form, you get access to a white paper, a PDF, some sort of premium content. This is content that in a lot of cases, it's your best piece of content. You've spent a lot of money polishing doing graphics work, doing layout. It's a high gloss piece of content. It's your best foot forward. The problem is models can't fill out your form. So they might not even know this exists. The thing you spent the most to create, you're not going to get any credit for because they can't get a hold of it. And so we have to figure out the right balance for that. That doesn't mean just put everything out there in the open, because we do want our content, our premium content. We want an exchange of value. We want the contact information for those people who want to read it. But we may need to think about, can we create derivative content? Can we have a summary excerpt, something that gives the models some surface area to actually go kind of index, crawl, know about, so that they can use your best content when people are asking questions about your brand or your product. Historically, this would have been a challenge from a traditional SEO standpoint, because we don't want to give a bot a different experience than a human user. That's a big red flag from a traditional SEO standpoint. And it still is from an SEO standpoint. From a GEO standpoint, though, there is a lot of technology being built now to allow AI bots to receive an AI bot specific experience, which means it would be fine to keep all of that premium content gated when you know it's a human. When you know it's an AI bot, let them through, remove the gate, let them access that content. But that's a individual discussion about this particular content, your particular company. Is that the right choice for you? But I think the takeaway here is that the content you're spending the most on, if it's gated behind a wall, you're not getting any credit for that on the LLM side. The other thing, we talked about this before, but it's stop writing monoliths, right? LLMs receive chunks as much as they can, as opposed to big documents. So a long 40-page document, even if it's a really nice, clean PDF, they're going to like the 800-word article better. And we're seeing that time and time again, where we want a kind of specific answer available. We want it modular, clear headings, useful on its own as much as possible, versus you need to understand the 7 paragraphs before and after that piece of content to really get it. And a lot of this just comes down to money. We're building AI data centers as fast as we possibly can, and this is one of the reasons, because it requires a lot of computing power to understand this content. And as much as they want to answer someone's question, they have a budget too. And they're going to want to answer it as cheaply as possible while still getting the correct answer. So if they have to come understand 10,000 words, that's going to cost a lot more money from a compute standpoint than understanding 800 words to deliver the same value to an end user. And so we have to think about that in ways like, we need to make it cost effective for them to get at the content, so that then that's certainly in the equation of who they choose, of whose content is going to be used to answer these questions. We want to make sure that ours has a good foot forward from a cost and ability to understand and clarity standpoint. And the easiest way to do that is to think of ways to break up those big pieces of content into more digestible bits. As we talked about before, these AEO fundamentals of structured markup, it's another way that we make it easier for them to understand. It's still true for organic search and for traditional Google style search. But all of these things make it quicker for them to try and understand the intent and the meaning, and to extract the data out of here, because they are, in a lot of cases, trying to do this real time. It's one of the differences between traditional search, where the index is built at night, in the background, long before a user actually comes along and does a search. A lot of what's happening here is it needs to be quick, because they're doing it real time while the user is waiting on a little spinner to come back with the answer. So they need to, the easier we make it for them to extract the information, the more likely they pick us, because we are a quick way that they can deliver that thing without having to do a bunch of processing on it. The technology behind an LLM allows them to understand all of those words and what they mean and how they relate to each other without the structure just makes it faster and cheaper for them. I think the biggest thing that we're seeing trend-wise in how people use LLMs is they're looking for answers. They are using these as research tools, and they're asking it questions more than, whereas before they were asking, they were searching for information and then deciding whether that information answered their question. Now they can just ask the question directly. And so they're treating them as answer engines. It's not for, I want to discover information sources and then formulate my own answer. It's, I'm going to ask you the question and you'll do that for me and give me the answer. And so one of the things that we're seeing wins in this space is actually making sure that our content answers a question. And in a lot of cases, does it answer the question that we believe the people who are interested in our products and services are going to ask? That's kind of the key here, is not just does it answer a question, using your institutional knowledge about your space and what you're trying to market to say, like, these are questions we believe people who want to learn about this will want to know the answer to, and then shaping our content structure and how we write it and what the strategy of what pieces we produce, to make sure that we really are focused on answerability above many other things there. Rather than listing out all of the factual information, forming it in the, here are the questions you'll want to know the answer to, and here are our answers to those questions, seems to be winning more often than not in this space. I think authority is critical. Traditional authority was basically how many links could you get to your domain name, to that evergreen branded landing page, right? Like, that's what you wanted to rank traditionally. Authority is way more complicated now. It's not just links. It is what people are saying about you and what other people are saying off of your content, right? Are more people not just linking to you, but are they talking about you? Are there multiple kind of like well-trusted sources that are saying positive things about your content? Does your content appear to be truthful and accurate? And it's cited as such in other pieces of content. Because instead of just understanding kind of the traditional search web of all these links that link to each other, and Google's algorithm was traditionally very link heavy as what's good and what's not good. LLMs have the ability to understand the semantics of the words. They understand the intent and whether it's a positive or negative mention. And so they have a lot more information available to them. And what we're seeing is that general authority out there on the internet about your topic matters, and it matters that other people are talking about you, not just you talking about yourself. Primary research seems to be disproportionately winning. If you are not just aggregating information from other places, but you are producing verifiable, unique research content in the space, that seems to be cited very often. But it just depends on what the picture of you is, and it's the meaning and the ability to derive that is so much bigger today than it was previously, where you kind of had the ability, if you got a bunch of links were good. They understand a lot deeper than that than they used to. There's different kinds of content. We believe product reviews and demos kind of still dominate that kind of early discovery. Like I said before, those case studies and like primary analyst research are winning right now. Other things are not good. Long form PDFs don't seem to work that well. Video, as much as video is a great engagement point for a human, it's not a great engagement point for an LLM. Can they understand the content in video? Like, does that technology exist? Absolutely. It's expensive, and they're going to use a lot of compute power to do it, so they would prefer not to have to. So if you're publishing amazing video content, you got to publish the transcripts, right? They understand words, and everything that they have to do to get from video to text words is extra work. It's not going to work as well. The other thing is like we really have to think about how would we expect the people who we want their eyeballs, we want their audience, we want their to come read and interact with us. How would we think that they would use this, and what content would they want to see? Um, that's always been important, but now we have to really figure out like they're not going to see that content in a lot of cases. The LLM is going to see it. How do we make it so the LLM can get at it and hand it over to the actual audience? Um, that's not the ideal scenario, but that's the world that we live in now. That's where the space is going. So we have to have the right mix that supports humans when they do come. But in order to get them there, we may have to have a different mix of content types and structure to really play towards what an LLM is interested in, because that is our first touch point in a lot of cases. I am the target market in the technology space. I'm a technology decision maker. And I certainly have done primary research on new product spaces that I need to buy in. I started ChatGPT. I don't know this space. I need to make a decision. What should I be looking at? I'm asking those questions, and then I'm taking that information and going to Google, doing more research, talking to vendors. But my first interaction with a certain brand was not their brand. It was a recommendation by ChatGPT that that brand was worth looking at. And so we want to be there, right? Because the alternative is they're not going to not answer the question. They're programmed to answer questions. So they're always going to provide an answer. And if the users are there asking and they're always going to answer, we want every opportunity to be in the mix, to have an opportunity to put our name in front of someone. And so that's, why we have to do this extra work to think about what's the right content mix, what's the right content type, how do we get an opportunity, an at bat, if you will, to come be in the conversation as opposed to not be there at all. So this is all great. How do we know if any of this works? Right now, the best thing we can do is called prompt monitoring. It's all we have, and unfortunately, it's synthetic. There's just now, we are starting to see the very beginning of LLMs from Bing, Bing search and Google are starting to release some very early data on what's happening inside the AI interactions. But it's really hard for them to track properly and to report on because the way these models work is such a black box from a technology standpoint in a lot of cases. So what most people are doing in the space now is systematically asking LLMs the questions that you think your buyers and your audience would be asking and seeing who gets cited. It is never going to be the exact thing that a real person asked. That data set currently does not exist. We do not know what our actual people are asking those LLMs. They have not released it. Someone will eventually, and the whole world will change. But for now, the best we can do is measure how it behaves when someone asks the question we think they're going to ask. There's tooling for this out there. Trying to do it manually and kind of spot checking it probably doesn't scale. There's two ways people are doing this. There's tools like that you come up with 50 prompts, 50 questions or prompts that you would feed ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, Meta, send them to Gemini, send them all in, see what comes back, see who gets cited, if anyone, and keep track of that over time. The other way is there's some of the big, search optimization companies out there are doing that at scale, but instead of trying to do it for a particular brand, they're trying to approximate what the internet at large would do. What are the 2 million prompts that people are using on a daily basis? And let's monitor all of those and just kind of build this like internet-wide data set that people can go research against and see what brands get cited a lot, what brands get cited not very much. It's much more about aggregate data versus tracking your individual brand. If you're really serious about this, you probably want access to both. You probably want to know those macro trends from a broader research tool and also have your internal benchmarks that you're measuring yourself against on probably a weekly or monthly basis. But this matters, right? Like this is a new thing that we need to be doing in addition to monitoring how we rank for things on traditional search. Traditional search, I think, based on what Google is saying in the past month, is not long for this world, but for the time being, it's still there. You're measuring that, I assume, and you want to see whether you're trending up or down. This is another thing that we probably need to start measuring to see if these tactics that I've been describing are working. In a lot of cases, because this happens real time, if you are you doing prompt monitoring and you have a tool for this, you oftentimes can see the effect of this in real time. You changed a page yesterday, I can see it change today because they're going out and they're fetching it real time and they're seeing the changes. We can actually kind of see some of the results a little faster than an SEO change, which might take several weeks to fully propagate. So we do have, even though it's synthetic and we don't get to see what real users are doing, we do get to get a little bit faster feedback loop on the changes that we're making. So what do we do with this? I think you audit your content, right? Gated versus ungated, I think, is huge in the tech space. And is it answer oriented? I think that's probably one of the biggest content strategy things you can do is be answer oriented. I think, do you feel like your content is a monolith, or is it already broken up into structured modules and smaller bytes that an AI bot can come access in real time in a cost-effective way? That doesn't mean you have to change all of the stuff that you're doing. It may be just an addition to. It may be creating derivative content, splitting it up, but you still keep that big primary source material. That's your marketing landing page and all of that documentation. Don't touch that. Use it to create derivative content. If you don't already have schema markup, now's the time. The best time to do that was 5 years ago. The second best time is right now. Make sure that those pages are marked up and they have attribution, who wrote them, and author names and all that sort of stuff is as important now as it ever was, because again, they're looking to derive trust and authority on these. And I think looking at your LLM citations next to the way you would traditionally monitor your search traffic, that's the way the world is going. The ability to go invest in that now, I think you'll be ahead of the curve trying to start tracking this stuff, because the world is changing quickly, and if you don't have the monitoring in place, we won't be able to keep up with the pace at which those tactics that worked today don't work the same, or maybe don't work as well 3 months from now. It is moving that fast today in 2026. I think it's worth saying, like, what shouldn't you? I don't believe you should ungate all your content. I think you need to have a serious conversation about what can be ungated and how can we make that available to LLM bots while not necessarily ungating it for humans. SEO spam, creating 10,000 pages just to go have extra pages and break that content up. Like, there is a line between good modular content structure and creating just page spam. They're going to see through that. They have as good or better ways to understand that that's what's happening as Google ever did. The other thing I think it's worth saying, don't assume this AI generated content that you could produce is going to fool an AI. They're just as good at detecting it as humans are starting to be, where you can feel that this content just wasn't written by a person. That doesn't mean that you can't use AI to plan those derivative works, plan out how to slice that content up, plan out how to create a different format of content from the one that maybe isn't as good. Use an AI tool to go generate all those captions from your video. Absolutely do that. But I don't think you want to assume that you can fool an AI with AI. That's not seeming to work very well for a lot of people so far. And I think don't assume your buyers aren't doing this, because they are. I think especially in the tech space, the adoption of this is wider than people think it is, because especially from an early discovery and research standpoint, the quality is good and it's saving people a ton of manual steps. That doesn't mean they're not going to go do deeper traditional research on products that they want to buy, but more and more they're starting with an LLM. And so I think you need to embrace that that's happening and has already happened. It's not like we're shifting there. That shift has happened. And so we need to be on top of it or we'll be kind of way behind the curve. The good news here is this is early. The LLM space and how they're treating content, how they're citing content, how the visibility of it works. We're Google in 2006 right now. It's wide open. There's a ton of opportunity. There's early mover advantage still. If you can invest in this now, there's going to be a disproportionate advantage to people who can move fast enough and who can get there now. That window will close eventually. This will get more stable. The pace will slow down, and it will become more of a just ingrained into the ecosystem. That's not where we are today. The space changes monthly, and if you can afford the time and resources to keep up with it, there is reward out there right now for that. And I think probably for at least the next year, maybe even 18 months, that's going to continue to be the case where early movers can win in the space. It's not too late for that. And lastly, Foundry's good at this. We have some flexibility that as a publisher and as a content syndication partner that not everybody has. We can publish that content that is in a different format that's LLM friendly, and we're another voice in the space that's talking about you. As we've said, authority matters. Our brands have it, and it's not just backlinks. We have a long-standing, portfolio of historical publishing brands, and that's, not something that everybody in the space has, and it's something that we obviously care deeply about maintaining. And so we're investing in the best practices in the space, and making sure that our brands have all that visibility that we want. And as a result of that, can help our marketing partners do that as well. So that's what I have for today. Thanks for listening, and hope you guys have the ability to go learn something from this and invest in it. Like as I said, I think there's a ton of opportunity out there for people who can spend the time and energy to really put some effort into this. Thanks.